Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us, and thank you, Business World, for inviting us to this panel. I'm Shriya Sethi. I'm a senior expert with McKinsey and Company and lead the social sector practice for India. I'm also the director for the Center for Social Impact, which is which is the work we do at McKinsey with the non-profit sector to help them build up their organizational strategy, their capability building programs, and also support them through volunteer programs and grants programs. Here we are today to talk about the move from women in development to women-led development. How we can work with women to get more women into leadership positions across the public sector, the private sector, as well as in all the different organizations they support. To begin with, I'd actually just request each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, maybe just about a minute, and then, Sohini, if I can start with you, but just ask you to kind of pass on the mic to the next person.
It'll be nice to have a little, if I can hear myself well, it'll be nice actually. So I'd request everyone to settle down. Sorry. My name is Sohini and I'm the CEO of an organization called Breakthrough. I've been working in the sector for the last 30 plus years. Sorry, you can see the gray in my hair. And I'm happy to be here for the conversation.
Hi, I'm Smita Sircar. I am the CEO and President of Grey Matters Capital. Grey Matters Capital is an impact investing organization which has been working for 2 decades. We do equity, debt, and outcome funding.
Hi, my name is Gaurav Mehta. I'm the CEO of Dharma Life Foundation, which is a non-profit owned social enterprise working on women entrepreneurship. I've been in the sector for 10 years, previously in private equity.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shikha, Akhilesh. I'm founder and CEO of Inspiring Mantras. This is taking leadership lessons and motivational talks across globe. And I am also author of Nation First. This is a horse-selling book. If you don't know the roles of women in army, the wife of officers, what they do, what they are about to do, and what are they doing for the last many years, you should read this book. It's also carries some part of a Kargil war. So this is based on my story. And nice meeting all of you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Aparna and I lead Asha Impact Trust. We're a dual entity where we invest in social enterprises and I lead the non-profit think tank. So our work's primarily been in 2 areas. One is blended finance and the other is government advocacy, and happy to share more from our work when we discuss further.
Thank you, everyone. Since we are here at the cusp of the G20, we should, at least acknowledge that G20 has a women's, W20 as they call it. And I believe the focus areas and the priorities that they've highlighted is education, a game-changing pathway to women's empowerment, women's entrepreneurship, a win-win for equity and economy, creating a partnership to promoting women's leadership at all levels, and an essential enabler for all these 3 to be digital inclusion. So, really kind of laying a pathway to increasing women's leadership across the board. But really, when we look at the numbers, this is really a far from reality, right? Like we have number of women CEOs in India today is 5%. Number of women founders, which is organizations with 1 woman founder at least, is 18%. Pure women founders, 5%. Women ministers in cabinet, 15%, 11 out of 77, right? Women representation in parliament, 14% in Lok Sabha, 10% in Rajya Sabha. So we're really far away from the reality of a women-led development. Before we get into some of the innovations and the solutions that we can really do, would love to maybe hear from everybody about the work you're doing and some of the challenges and barriers you see, which really stand in the way from women becoming leaders in their field today. So Sohini, maybe you can start with you.
Breakthrough's a 23-year-old organization, and we've been working to actually transform gender norms that limit women's ability to reach their full potential. And And one of the ways we've been doing it is to build the leadership of young people. 347 million young people in India in the age group of 15 to 24. And we are hoping that by working with them, we'll be able to build a generational shift in the way we look at gender-based barriers and discriminations that hold you up. So we work mostly in rural areas. We work in about 6 states of India, all in the northern part of the country for no reasons that I need to explain to you. And our work has been to actually work with the young people in schools as well as in communities so that we could bring, first of all, a gender lens into the education system itself. We work across about 1,200 government schools, and in Punjab and in Orissa, we have a state MOU with the government education department where we are bringing in a gender lens into the education system itself. As you all know, our enrollment process for girls and boys are equal, 100%, I think, enrollment right now. But out of that 100%, 68% girls actually reach secondary education and about 41% reach, class 12. What's this gap and why does this happen? So we want to bring in reforms like change in the educational curriculum, which actually builds interest in young girls and boys to stay in school and, go through a curriculum that holds up the real picture for them. To bring in more women as role models into the curriculum. To look at teachers and how can teachers kind of stop bringing their discrimination and their biases into the classroom and ask more, questions of girls or create a more gender equitable environment in the school. To work with also parental engagement in terms of the PTMs, where the discourse is not just about school infrastructure or learning outcomes, but also about girls' aspirations for themselves, staying off marriage, and delaying the age of marriage, and having something to do other than just get married. So all of this requires a lot of work and a lot of convincing, both at the governmental level as well as the corporate level, that this is important work, because in India, we know the gender gap is increasing with every study that we see. And we know that gender equity lies at the heart of gender-based violence, which is one of the leading problems that we have in women's empowerment and even women joining the workforce, which has been dwindling over the past few years. So that's the kind of work that we do. We also use media a lot because, media shapes our cultural beliefs, right? And if you see hyper-masculinity on our Hindi films, if we see hyper-masculinity and if you see women as this, as a victim all the time on our mainstream Hindi movies and OTT platforms, or a lot of violence, then that's what, young people and especially young boys imbibe as something that they should look forward to. So can we create an alternative, media? Can we create more women behind the cameras and behind the scenes so that we have progressive content on OTT platforms as well as on media? So, this is the kind of work that we've been doing for the past 23 years. We reach about 40 million adolescents, 40 lakhs adolescents with our curriculum across, all the 6 states that we are working in. Each year, in our deep transformation areas in 4 states, we have 100,000 adolescents join our program and go through that. As an impact, we've seen increase in age of marriage by almost 2 years, increase in age of schooling for girls by almost 2 years, girls demanding things like mobility from their parents, girls demanding things like leisure time, which is very, very rare for young girls in rural areas from their parents, and even boys standing up to make sure that their sisters or their classmates can go to school safely. I'll stop here and let you ask more questions.
Yes, but I would love to hear from you.
So Grey Matters Capital, our mission is finding purpose with 100 million women. And over 2 decades, we have worked in microfinance, to mainstream it with private capital. We worked in education finance because the women in those microfinance groups told us that they wanted something for their children as a ticket out of poverty. We worked around learning to earning. And our why has always been women-led, right? So I'm very happy that, this framing around women-led development has come about. because it will be a multiplier. So in our work, as I told you earlier, we do equity, we do debt, we do alternates, and we ensure that the themes in which we invest, whether it's financial inclusion, education, skilling, are all pertinent to women, and we only make the investment when there is impact on women, and also in the portfolio management. So just to give you a sense, it starts from the board, the women's representation on the board, whether women are there in leadership positions in those organizations, whether the value chain, is gender sensitive, the employee policies, all the way to product and services, and then of course finally the outcome for the women in the last mile, right? Women and girls. So it's been pretty interesting. As we have gone deeper and deeper, we have been wondering, uh, what is that one thing, if we are able to do, it makes a substantial difference in the context of India. And we have understood that it is primarily money in the hands of the women. And in last year, we started a program within Grey Matters called Power Up. And the idea really is to work with our agents, which are basically entrepreneurs, right? And I was listening to the argument around social entrepreneur, whether it's impact entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is an entrepreneur solving a problem, right? So we've started working with these entrepreneurs to actually identify what is the barrier. And then our strength is financial innovation. And we work with them to actually, design products where these barriers are lifted. So to give you an example, we've done three, other than our debt, equity, investments and all, which are there in India and across the world. Under Power Up, we have done three, pilots. These are small bits of money which is used for catalyzing. So, with respect to, with one entrepreneur, a women entrepreneur, we co-designed a women income sharing agreement so that the gap between learning and employability is bridged. We call it visa. Another we did with another entrepreneur who's a fintech entrepreneur, product line innovations around new to credit. Third, we rolled out a hackathon for entrepreneurs who have already done their 0 to 1 journey, are in their 1 to 10 journey, and told them that if you were to design a product or a service which would reach 10 times more women that you're currently reaching, what would you do? We got very interesting responses, and we are in the process of finalizing the winners from there. So it's an entrepreneurial approach also from our side, though we are capital providers, and the challenges are huge. But if we collaborate and also align the incentives, I think it's solvable.
So Dharma Life works on grassroots women entrepreneurship. So we go into rural panchayats, recruit one woman from that panchayat and make her a social entrepreneur in that community. She then works on 4 thematic areas in that panchayat. One is around climate action and energy access, then it's health and well-being, it is gender rights or gender equity, as well as digital education and livelihoods. So with this model, we have created now about 18,000 women entrepreneurs across 14 states in India and have impacted across the 4 themes more than 14 million people. I think to the topic around women entrepreneurship, I think we use the one role model we've created to get other women into the workforce. So I think because we see that the role models kind of inspire others. And so we started recently an initiative which probably links to the topic for today, which is called Jaya, where we use that one woman to first sensitize other women, then counsel them and their families to permit them to not only to join the workforce, but also now more and more not only look at gendered roles. And then we help them start businesses or place them, addressing the concerns they have. And we then create ecosystems. I mean, it's very complex because there's so many diverse things they want to do. But for the ones where we have kind of our networks, we have created ecosystems for them to succeed, helping them start the businesses or get placed. So with that, we've added another 10,000 women to the workforce over the last 2 years. So that's briefly, I think, what we do.
So for the women to do the leadership role, first of all, we should understand what is leadership. What are the characteristics you require in a leader? So if I sum up, it is a one thing that is very important thing is empathy. You have to have empathy, understand your team members. That is the first and foremost character of a leader. Then the vision to show and the lead the way. That is the second character I see is very important. Then the third thing is taking decisions, ability to take the decisions. And then the fourth thing I see that accountability, if there is any failure, if there is any mistake, you take that accountability on behalf of your team. And the fifth thing I think is actually the resilience, how to bounce back. If there is anything goes wrong, you know how to bounce back. And I think women, they are naturally wired with these all characters. I'll say that women are born leaders. But the only thing how they realize it, how they come up, what is stopping them to take these leadership role. So for these things, I think there are some points we have to look forward. The psychology and the behavior of a woman. The first thing, these humble characters, these creatures, they are so down to earth and so prone in their own families. They are afraid of the work-life balance. 2 दिन ट्रिप पे जाएंगे, third day they will see they have a guilt factor that they were not at home. This is a basic character of a lady. So you have to overcome that. Family members have to support them. The second thing I see is a fear of failure. What will happen if something will go wrong? I will be out. Most of the ladies from the rural area and other towns, small towns, they have struggled to come up to this level. So they find a moderate path that ठीक है इस पे चलते रहेंगे तो I will be out of the out somewhere in the social group. There will be social group. There are the opportunities to grow. And the third thing I think is lack of self-promotion. These ladies they do work, they think that this is my duty, I have to do this, but they don't stand for that I have done this. For example, if I will see, and I will say you, that how many of you know that there is a Army Wife Welfare Association? This is the biggest organization, and NGO is working silently behind the armed forces. Even the Navy, Air Force, and Army, they all have this. These ladies work silently. They don't wear stars on their shoulders. They don't wear uniform. Still, they are working silently for the organization. There is a hierarchy. Everything is there. But they don't look for any award and any recognition. They should come up. And we all as a sisterhood, and even for the men, I will say they should stand up and support these ladies to come up from this hindrance. This is all. Thank you.
I think all of you have raised some really, fantastic points to the work that you're doing. I think, some of the challenges that you've put forward, I think very, very right. And all the grassroots work, Smita, through your investments and what Breakthrough is doing. So I'm going to be wearing 3 hats here, Shriya. So because Asha is 2 entities, through one entity, we're doing, like as I mentioned, investments, so there, I think, Smita, you've already touched upon, so maybe I won't elaborate so much, but I think we're all doing our bit, but there is obviously a lot more to do. I think when you look at top of funnel, how many women are actually choosing entrepreneurship. I'm not even going to go down the route of social entrepreneurship or regular entrepreneurship, but just top of funnel to begin with, is not that much for some of the reasons that you've all mentioned. I mean, whether it's societal, the characteristic, this whole fear of failure, always putting family first, etc. So as investors, I think we need to proactively, make a call to say, okay, fine, how am I going to, be promoting more women entrepreneurs? How do I increase that top of funnel? Do I do that through, systematic interventions within the organizations and without, right? So within some of the things that, Smita already talked about, so having more IC representation, having more women investors, when you're dealing with entrepreneurs at large, supporting, women-led organizations over there as well, and making sure right through supply chains and the policies, you are seeing more women in the workforce. So I think that's sort of one lens that Asha takes to promote more gender equality, or more sort of women-led, if I can choose that term. I think the second work that we've been doing is through our government advisory and ecosystem work. I think even in the previous panel, there was a lot of focus on how do you build collective philanthropy, or how do you really develop an ecosystem. And I've heard some of you talk about that as well, right? This is not going to happen by itself. So how do we actually work with all the stakeholders? So we're doing a lot of work in Punjab actually also. So, working with accelerators there, setting up an entire mission to support entrepreneurship with a focus on promoting more women-led entrepreneurs in the state. So by design, the accelerator cohorts are developed in a way that we are supporting more entrepreneurs coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities, because again, there was talk of privilege, which is, if I can extend that to sort of being a more tier 1 association. So we're, consciously going out to tier 2, tier 3 towns, making sure we're interacting with women groups like FICCI, Flow, etc., to make sure that more women have the right ecosystem, whether it's business mentorship, whether it's access to markets, to capital, etc. So to make sure that some of that spade work is, done for them. The third lens is, that of blended finance. I mean, when we talk, if we step back and we look at the SDG goals, because you also talked about G20 and the agenda there. I mean, there's billions of dollars that is required to create a more gender equitable and then perhaps a women-led society. So where is all that financing really going to come from? I mean, government and philanthropic capital can only go so far. I think on the previous panels, Nupur brought up that you have to make capitalism work for you, right? So how do you bring commercial capital into that mix? Blended finance is one such approach that lets you do that. So we've actually been using blended finance as a tool to design programs that will provide some of these wraparound services for women that will help them excel in whatever they want to do, whether it's social entrepreneurship, whether it's skilling. Jayant, talked about the Skill India bond as well. So there are such initiatives. I mean, this is just one, arrow that we have in our quiver, but, how do you make finance work for you? So that is something that we're trying to do at Asha as well. How do we use innovative finance, blended finance to make it work for some of this?
Thank you everyone for sharing that. And I think what came across very clearly was some of the fundamental barriers that women face. And I think everybody brought out, a different set of barriers. But when we look across industries, when we look across grassroots, when we look across even, political the ecosphere, honestly, some of these challenges and barriers really remain consistent. We heard that there is access to finance, and whether it's a VC funded startup or it's a grassroots funded, access to finance remains one of the fundamental barriers. There's cultural biases, there's care responsibilities, there's internal barriers that women face. So, would love to maybe go a little deeper into this. And, Smita, maybe if I can ask you first, when you do work with women entrepreneurs, what are some of the, you mentioned some of this, right? Like you're trying to bring in more women into the boardrooms, you have ideas. But what are some of the barriers you think that these women entrepreneurs face, and maybe some of the things that you're doing actually to help them overcome these barriers?
I think overall, right, from the last panel also. Okay, so from the last panel also, the structure of funding has to change. Whether you do wraparounds, bring in blended, if you want the outcome, you have to fund the outcome at a lower cost. right? So that even in the last panel, right, when I was hearing them, they have to fundraise. You know, every year, if I give investment to a woman entrepreneur or any entrepreneur, right, they have to go on the VC curve. For many, it will not work, right? Especially if you want inclusive growth. So we have to figure out a way actually to fund the outcomes in a way where there is benchmarking and people can actually fund, whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit, the outcomes. So larger organizations can probably scale down and actually use the other smaller organizations into their value chains, right? So that's an overall problem. Other specific problems, if you are wanting women-led, you want her to feel powerful, right? From a Maslow's hierarchy, safety concerns have to be taken care of, right? The basics have to be taken care of before, she can climb that, right? And then become a contributor. We have a groundswell in the country. We are laying digital infrastructure, we are giving smartphones, but that energy has to be harnessed. So some of the things are around whether I talk about a VC funded entrepreneur or micro entrepreneur, or somebody in the last, I think Satyam mentioned, everybody is an entrepreneur, right? Role models are required, right? We need to amplify those role models that it is possible, and whatever impact you're creating, you don't need to be an Elon Musk, right? But whatever impact you're creating, that is enough for a purposeful life. Second thing I think is around mentorship and support. And Aparna, you mentioned that, right? The wrapper programs. It's not just capital, it has to come with support. Then we have to actually work with our entrepreneurs and co-design. Work with the women and co-design. They understand their lives much better, right? And I already talked about the outcome, monetization part of it, no matter which entrepreneur is working. And the last is how do you put the jigsaw together, right, in a cost-effective way through collaboration. If we are able to crack these, and these are possible because we have DPIs which are coming in, we talked about AI, these have to be used for good. And, we can unleash a different model from India.
Yeah.
I think just one quick point. I think what Smita was saying just triggered this thought, and it's actually very, very powerful. I think in having not just, if we're talking about women, obviously, so we'll stick to that. But when one is designing programs or funding, etc., having beneficiary voice as part of that, I think is absolutely critical. I think in a lot of programs, one sees that you're sitting and designing this top down because it's very funder led. I think we need to create sort of equal tables where you have beneficiaries come, they know their reality best, right? So I think it is the organization, like what you're doing, what you talked about with Dharma Life, they know what they want and how can we really create programs around that. So including that in whatever, whether it's an enterprise that we are building or a program that we're building, I think, or even a financial product for that matter, having beneficiary voice is so critical to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just stay on you, but do you see in your cohorts that you work in Punjab, because it's not only women entrepreneurs, do you see differences in the requirements, or when women entrepreneurs come forward, and would love to kind of hear about some of those.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to generalize, but yes, I think we have seen that, and for that particular reason, we made it very clear in our mandate that we are going to work to promote more women entrepreneurs. I think for some of the inherent challenges that you mentioned, that Shikha touched upon as well, those are very apparent, right? There is a lack of exposure. And this is, I guess, more for tier 2, tier 3. I think Satyam touched upon this in the previous panel as well. So I think there's a lack of exposure. There is an unequal balance towards caregiving as well. So a lot of them, want to start up, but for various reasons, put family first. We've seen that happen. I mean, I think a lot of the times panel discussions like these put people on the platform that maybe don't face these challenges, again, because we come from privilege or whatever, we have better care set up at home. But the reality is that people coming from tier 2, tier 3 towns where we are trying to promote more entrepreneurship have to then compromise, or for at least for a few years, put their entrepreneurship or whatever work dreams aside, and give unbalanced care at home. So we have seen that, and which is why I think, again, going back to my previous point, how you design your program. I mean, maybe to give an example, don't make it a physical program, but everyone's now used to doing work thanks to COVID online. So can you provide some of these sessions online, which will then allow them to cull out time from their days, not travel for some of these meetings. But yet, I think there's a balance that's required, because if you are wanting to give exposure to investors and to the rest of the VC world, then yes, you do want to nudge them towards the networking, towards meeting these people. So one has to strike a balance, but a very sort of conscious design element is necessary when you are designing programs.
Yeah, and then it's educating the ecosystem around those becomes equally important, so everybody understands that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Gaurav, I think you work a lot with women entrepreneurs. They're a very different type of women entrepreneurs, much more grassroots. And Satyam talked about it in the last panel about how sometimes it's a necessity and not really a choice to be an entrepreneur. But then at that level, community buy-in, kind of, a lot of the internal things that Shikha talked about become really important. So, would love to kind of hear about how you work with the community to enable these 18,000 women entrepreneurs as well.
So I think the community buy-in is probably the most essential here. I think we work in typically villages of 500 households, so very last mile, and there's few barriers. First of all, I think, and we measured this a little bit through a study we did recently, but I think the first issue is that even if they're interested, they have to be nudged, right? Unfortunately, it depends on the state. Some states are better. I think you mentioned the northern states. It's more difficult there, where you kind of have to first, get access to these women who want to identify who wants to actually join. And that's by using our entrepreneur, we managed to do that. But then once you've done this, and then it's getting the families buy-in, and the care issue is a huge one, I think. And there, addressing it's unfortunately, the ROI of the person working has to be higher than the care, responsibility. So it's not always financial, but it's also sometimes very subjective. So then finding a way to solve the care issue becomes the second issue, as well as then thirdly, the family has to be convinced that what she would be doing would bring respect to the family and not create any risk. So these are some of the barriers we deal with. And normally, I think it's a commitment we have to make to the family to start with, or now our entrepreneur does for other women. Then it's interesting actually when they start how this changes, right? So first you give that commitment, and when they start working, it's actually first about building the identity in the village. Mostly they're known as with their husband's name, or so that's why what you do is when they start working and they bring their first income and they get exposure, so a lot of hand-holding is required at the beginning, that's when identity is built. It's not even the money, it's actually identity first. Once the identity is built and money starts flowing, then it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. It becomes an automatic wave, right? And they inspire others, and it becomes kind of, that's how we've seen this. So I think it's been, interestingly, we went through a journey where we always wanted to working on livelihoods, but we were gender neutral. But then when we assessed the impact after the first year, 2 years, we became women-led because the impact was so much higher. So we actually just only worked with women. And then when we worked with men, that's the last point I make, it's usually to support the women. That may sound a bit, I think I'm saying this, but I think it's essential that the men support. You have to bring them on the journey. But it's when women lead, then the impact is much, much higher.
Shikha, you wanted to say, and would love to have you address some of the internal barriers you talked about.
Actually, this is working, yes. Actually, there are some policies governed by the government. They have laid out very nice frame structure to promote all ladies to come and take the leadership roles. It is in 2001. Then they redefined it in 2016. It is very much there on the internet if you will go and see. They are all women friendly, and they are supporting according to the securities issue, the finance, the funding, and everything is there. But we need to expose this. We need to make them aware of all the benefits they will get if they will come up. I don't think that 50% of them knows all these policies. We have to make them available to the every woman, every educated or non-educated ladies, that they could do, and the government is supporting since a very long back. They are supporting and making these policies. So it should be handy, and it should be taught to them in the schools. There should be some curriculum regarding to this. In the colleges, there should be some workshops, so that they know that what will the benefit if they will come out and come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Shikha. So you would love to get a sense from you. You know, you work with so many state governments, with schools, education. But one of the things that we've never really talked about is how the private sector can actually be part of this, right? I mean, private sector today is still the largest employer of women. So, you know, what are some of the things, and you know, even just working with girls, with people in school and helping them understand a lot of what Shikha said. So what are maybe some of the things that you can, if you had to do a call out to the private sector, what would a kind of wish list be?
I think, there are actually, before that, there's a lot of things to be done at home itself. Aparna was talking about, Smita was talking about, and you heard from Gaurav. And I've heard this from Picky Flo, from Archana Goradia and others, that even as women entrepreneurs from highly privileged backgrounds, when women want to start something, we are always told, छोटा से शुरू कर ले, बाद में देखा जाएगा. This is the kind of mindset that holds women back. ठीक है तो छोटा से, so the norm becomes छोटा से शुरू करो, बाद में देखा जाएगा. Nobody is telling you, and when a boy, son says this to a father, said, इतना छोटा क्यों सोच रहे हैं, बड़ा से सोचिए. So where can we even begin to address this discrimination in our homes? That's the first thing that we need to do. And which is why, through our school engagement program, we want to build discourses on a parent-teacher meeting in government schools about careers and aspirations. As Shikha said, we have to build careers and aspirations for girls from school. They should know about what lies ahead. They should know that marriage is not the end goal. This is a problem that young girls in rural India feel, and face all the time, because parents don't even value education for their girls, because they say that, क्या होगा पढ़े लिख कर, पराया धन ही है, दूसरे के घर जाओगे. This is the standard, discourse that we hear. But no parents can say no when we talk about aspirations, careers for girls, that the girl is also capable of earning, capable of having a career, capable of doing something. So my first thing is that the government should make mandatory a gender lens and bring in a gender lens into the education system in India and in the government school education system, which reaches out to the most marginalized and to the most number of people. If we can talk about careers and aspirations for girls from an age of, let's say, 14, 15, then girls also know that there's a world outside there. In our work with girls in UP, we've seen girls are now choosing, employment opportunity like welding, like electrician, TV mechanic. These are very men, dominated jobs. Girls do not, opt for these kind of things. The second thing is, I think this is both government and the private sector. You're from McKinsey. McKinsey's Power of Parity report says that if India can add 63% of women to the workforce, we can bring in so many trillion GDPs. I don't even know how many zeros that are. Currently, it's at 32%. And for over the last 1.5 years, it has not moved a bit. In fact, it has regressed, while workforce participation for men has gone up. We've seen Pew Research where employees have said that if there's a job and there are two contenders, the job is going to go to a man and not to a woman. So this is a huge bias that is there even within the private sector. Where are the jobs for women? And B, are you considering women who's much more qualified for a job, or you consider a man? It's merit best, I know, but there are women out there who are absolutely equipped to handle those jobs. The second thing is that safety. Safety in transport, safety at workplace. So, we used to work with about 12,000 garment workers, all women, in Faridabad. And one of the things was that the moment women stepped outside of home, they felt unsafe. They didn't have, they didn't have a proper mode of transport. They didn't want to take buses in Delhi because you know what buses in Delhi are like. They didn't even wanted to take an auto because auto wala will play a lewd song and will adjust his rear view mirror. So there's so many cases of safety, and women do not feel safe in Delhi and in many parts of North India and in India. So how can we make that safer? CCTV cameras and things work for a while, but you have to make the culture so much safer. And lastly, workspaces. I think there is so much need to work with men and boys in our country and teach them about consent. We have no concept of consent. We do not ask women, is this okay for me to do this for you? Is it okay for me to, even if you want to kind of date somebody in your workspace, you have to ask that person's consent. You have to make sure that, that is absolutely in your private life and not within the workspace. How many people have mandated the wash policy? I was in a roundtable a few months back, and there was somebody from GE, and I said, men know that they're going to lose their jobs if they do this. That's not the answer. It doesn't have to be a tick mark. It has to be something that you actually imbibe and feel that, for my act of such and such thing, there is a sufferer on the other side of the table. And lastly, I want to talk about a representation. Why can't we have more women represented at this kind of places? The prior, panel, just because we are talking about women-led development, there are 4 women on this panel. In the prior panel, we were talking about social entrepreneurship, so you have 4 men and 2 women. Why can't we, there's so many fantastic women social entrepreneurs in India. Where are they? So representation is a very big thing. It's optics. People see that representation. I mean, you do a quick scan of the room. There's so many more men in this room, but I'm sure there's a lot of women in this industry as well. So representation matters a lot. So these are the few things that I don't know which is private sector, which is public sector, what is home, but everybody has to work.
Thank you so much, Sohini. And I think this has been a fascinating conversation. We've heard some of the barriers, but I think what's encouraging is we've also heard some really interesting solutions or things that we can work towards. Co-designing programs is really important, including the men and the families in the solutions, working with the internal barriers of the women and giving them a voice to speak up, ensuring that safety and security is looked at, ensuring there's representation equally. These are all things that all of us can actually do in our daily work. There doesn't have to be a special fund or a foundation, right? I think each of these are initiatives that we can take in our daily life, and I'm hoping that's what we take away from today's conversation. So thank you so much, and thank you Business World and AVPN for inviting us for this conversation.